Are you struggling with ankle mobility? If so, let's take a quick test. Drop down into a lunge, back knee on the floor, and bend your front knee over your big toe, past your big toe, keep your heel on the ground, and now take a selfie photo. Measure the angle at your ankle. This is called dorsiflexion, and we're looking for a 10 to 20 degree angle or even more. Now let's do the second test. Opposite direction, point your toes, heels together, sit back on your heels. You should be able to sit comfortably here for at least 2 minutes without your ankles screaming at you. Why does this matter? Well, you probably already know for a full butt to heel squat, we need adequate dorsiflexion. What you might not realize is to get up and down from the ground, you need the opposite range, plantar flexion. See that pointed toe? And lastly, almost no one realizes this, but if you lack adequate dorsiflexion, as knee over big toe, it can affect your walking and your running gait and can contribute to knee pain, hip pain, and even lower back problems. Hey, my name is Lucas. I'm a yoga teacher and a teacher trainer, and I've struggled a lot with my feet and my ankles. I have really high arches and really tight feet. I struggled with plantar flexion, but even more so with dorsiflexion, and through my studies and my teaching and my own training, I've learned a bunch of things that I think will be really helpful for you. In this video, we'll talk about the anatomy of your ankle mobility. Number two, we'll talk about the difference between soft tissue, specifically muscle issues, or bony tissue issues. And lastly, we'll look at some specific exercises to activate those muscles of your lower limb and also to mobilize your ankle. To support the channel, the simplest thing you can do is hit subscribe down below. Doesn't cost a thing, and you'll get updated when my new videos come out. If you'd like to skip forward to the exercises we're talking about today, you'll find a PDF in the description down below. Here's the thing with me. I spent a lot of time working on both ranges of motion with my ankles. I even wore one of these crazy boots to bed for a long time. In fact, I wore 2 of them. And I was trying to find the perfect protocol. What I find is that most people online are really confused about what's limiting or enabling their ankle mobility, and they're confused as to how to go about fixing it. Let's first talk about the anatomy of your ankle movements and to think about where the limiting factor really is. When you look at your lower leg here, essentially below the knee, we have somewhere between 11 and 13 muscles. Believe it or not, there's some individuality and different people count differently, but a lot of the muscles are really quite small. We'll talk specifically today, just for simplicity, about 4 muscles on the front side, the anterior side, and 4 muscles on the back side. We get rid of my bones here and we can take a look at my leg. On the front side of your shin here, we have your anterior tibialis. Next to that, we have your extensor digitorum longus. Down below, your extensor hallucis longus, and then a smaller muscle, your fibular tertius muscle. And the bigger ones here, you can feel them, you can palpate them, and some of them are smaller and a little bit more difficult to feel. But essentially, if you grab the front side of your leg, these muscles here, when they contract, they pull your big toe, your smaller toes, and your entire ankle into what's called dorsiflexion. So they contract to pull your toes towards your knee, and they relax for the other range, that plantar flexion. This sounds obvious, but it's easy to get confused about what's going on. When we go around to the back side of your leg, right up from your Achilles tendon, is called your soleus muscle. This is a flat, triangular, wide muscle here down below. And up above, this bulbous muscle is called your gastrocnemius. And this muscle actually crosses your knee joint. And there's also your plantaris muscle up here, which crosses down below. And then we have your posterior tibialis, which is underneath and a smaller muscle as well. So essentially 4 muscles on the front, 4 on the back, and then some other miscellaneous smaller muscles underneath. And again, remember, when these muscles contract, what that means is in order to do plantar flexion, we need this front compartment to lengthen. In order to do dorsiflexion, we need this back compartment to lengthen, which will become more relevant when we take a look at some postures here in just a moment. Many people online are convinced that their bony tissues are the limiting factor, and for sure that does happen. It's possible to have bone spurs or osteoarthritis. You can have osteophytes and actual bone abnormalities or fusions where that would limit your range. But this is a very, very small percentage of people. For most of us, it's those muscles upstream that are limiting or enabling our ability to move our ankle around. So How much mobility is possible? How much gains could you make based on where you're at today? To understand your potential, I think it's helpful to look at the extremes. And if you look at weightlifters, if you look at power lifters, for example, who spend years or even a decade plus with really heavy weight on their back and squatting full range of motion, often butt to heels, even among those athletes who are very elite, the majority of them are wearing weightlifting shoes, and the average heel lift is around 2.5 centimeters or around an inch. And those are allowed in competition as well, which tells me that even if elite athletes, some of them, need a heel lift to work around limited ankle range, probably there's a great deal of bony structure variance that just won't change based on who you are. However, all of us can reestablish what I call basic range of motion. That means you can squat bum to heels with healthy knees and hips and a lower back. That means you can get up and down from the ground, and for sure you can improve your walking, your running gait, so that you can move with your ankles in a way that's optimal for your knees and your hips and your lower back. Let's take a look at some exercises, first to activate the muscles of our lower leg, and then to lengthen those tissues so we can increase our range of motion. As we discussed previously, our modern footwear can create a lot of problems down below our knees, and one of those is a lack of mechanoreception, proprioception. We just don't have a really good brain to body connection. So we'll start off with a quick activation exercise that can help us before we start stretching. Take a block and put it right between your thighs like this. I'll then turn and I'll use the countertop or a high chair like I have here. And my front foot, which is my right foot, I will go into dorsiflexion, so knee over big toe. And with my back foot, I'll go into plantar flexion, so on top of my foot. And then I'll lift up on the ball of my big toe on my right leg, and I'll balance here and breathe. And essentially what I'm trying to do is activate those muscles, and you might feel some trembling and some shaking. You might feel a little wobbly. Squeeze into that block, and if you need support, at any time you could use your stool or your countertop for support. You really want to fatigue those muscles. Again, because we lack that neuromuscular connection, it can be hard to stretch that area when everything is dull and has lost sensation because it's been wrapped in overly padded shoes, in many cases for years or decades plus. Good. Put your hands down, release your feet, keep your block where it is, and we'll switch. So point your right toes. Your left knee bends over your big toe and will pop up onto the ball of the foot. And again, same idea here. We want to actively press down into your big toe mound, actively press down to the top of your foot. Steeple your hands at your heart and gaze in front of you on the floor. Some shaking, some trembling is totally normal. We're looking to fire up and activate those little muscles of our lower legs before we lengthen them. If you need for balance, you could always tap, or even hold on if you need to. If you don't need to, place your hands steepled at your heart and breathe here. Good. Place your hands down, place your heels down. From here, I'll move my stool a little bit forward and we'll move into some calf stretches, working on the back of our leg. Remember, your soleus is down here and your gastroc is up here. We stretch our gastroc with a straight leg and our soleus with a bent leg. Here's the setup. I'll have my right foot forward to start, my left foot back behind me. It's a pyramid stance, and what I'd like you to do is start off with both your legs all the way straight. For now, keep your back heel down on the ground, and you can bend your front knee just a little bit and pause here. Now, if you look back, most of you will find that your foot has turned to the outside. I'd like you to make it so that the outer edge of your foot is parallel. So if there were a laser beam coming out of your big toe on the back foot, it would shoot straight forward. Now you can do this with your heel up. Take a look, but just be careful because that puts a lot more leverage on your plantar fascia and on your Achilles tendon. So for that reason, I often do it with my heel down because I've had plantar fasciitis in the past, and I find that this tends to load up my gastroc and tends to avoid my plantar fascia and my Achilles. My front leg is pretty much useless, which means if I want to, I could even come up on the ball of my foot. And my feet are here just to hold my body in place, so if it's more comfortable, you could certainly drop down onto your elbows. With a straight leg on the back, we're prioritizing that bulbous muscle up on top, the gastrocnemius, and in the second minute we spend in this pose, we'll bend our knee, which is coming right now, And by bending our knee, we'll then move the stretch down. You can see I'm gently bending my back knee here. I'll move the stretch down below that bulbous gastroc into our soleus muscle. Remembering that those muscles, specifically soleus and gastrocnemius, are largely responsible for limiting dorsiflexion, knee over big toe. Now at this point in the pose, you should be at least a 7 of 10 intensity. If you can, amp up the intensity to about 8 of 10. Really kick back through your heel here as you breathe in through your nose for 4. And out through your mouth for 8. Again, the heel up variation is okay. Just to be conservative, I always do it heel down, but there's nothing wrong with having your heel up. It just gives you more leverage on those tissues where you might not want it. Let's switch legs. Shake that one out. Left leg's in front, right leg's back behind you. We'll start off in that pyramid stance. Straight leg. Find your position, look back. Make sure your outer edge of your right foot is parallel with the mat, and your big toe, if there were a laser beam, would shoot straight ahead. Good. Remember, my front foot's just here as a placeholder, so I could pop up on my toes. My arms are just here for support, so I could drop down onto my forearms. That works just fine as well. You do whatever you need to do. We'll keep our legs straight to drive the stretch up to the top of our calf muscle, that gastrocnemius. Let's breathe in through our nose for 4. And out for 8. Good. Make sure you feel your big toe mound. Make sure you feel your heel back behind you. Good. We'll move into the second minute of the pose, and I would like you to bend your back knee just a little bit. That'll drive the intensity downward. When you first initially bend your back knee, you might not feel the stretch. You sometimes have to wiggle and shake your hips backwards. Really, there we go, have to drive the weight into your heel and into your big toe mound to get that stretch back into your gastroc. You might need to adjust your front foot by going up on the ball of your foot or releasing your foot to the ground. Do whatever you need to drive that stretch back. Good, let's shake out our legs. You can pedal back and forth. Let me get rid of this stool. For our final pose, sit down on your knees together and your feet apart. You can start off with a block underneath your bum and your hands on top of your legs. From there, perhaps you move down and sit a little bit lower on the block. And if your knees feel okay, and if your ankles aren't screaming at you too much, you can potentially free float. That's where you hang over your legs. Maybe there's a little space under your bum, or maybe your bum drops down towards the floor. Please be mindful of your knees. You don't have to push very hard to get an intense stretch here on your ankles. And as an added benefit, of course, we're stretching our hip flexor here on the top rectus femoris and our quadriceps as well. In this posture, your objective is simply to relax and allow your ankles to get a good stretch. You could always do this on top of a bed or a mattress or a soft carpet to ease up that pressure on your ankles a little bit. Unlike other joints of the body where we do deep stretching, where we try to aim for 7 of 10 intensity, when we're working on our ankles, we can often take it up to an 8 of 10 intensity, especially in this plantar flexion range. A couple things to think about when you're working on your ankle mobility. You're quite literally working on the foundation for all of your movement, whether that's running or jumping or walking. So if you're doing anything explosive, lifting heavy weights, playing pickup basketball, playing pickleball, anything where you're up on the balls of your feet or sprinting, you need to be really careful. You can dramatically increase the range of motion of your ankles, But again, remember, you're playing around with the foundations of your posture in the same way you wouldn't go banging at the foundations of your home without being really mindful. The same thing is true here. Rather than pushing really hard in a really short period of time, I'd encourage you to invest a couple of minutes a day, like we just did in these poses, and take it really gradually so that you can incorporate your increased mobility in a period of 2 to 3 months rather than 2 to 3 weeks. Inhale through your nose for 4. And exhale through your mouth for 8. Let's just do one more together. Inhale for 4. Exhale for 8. Good, and then slowly move over to your right side. Release your legs, and you can punch out any tension below and above your ankles, and below and above your knees. Hope you found this video helpful. Remember to grab the PDF download in the description down below. Hit subscribe to get my next video, which will come out next week. If you'd like to train with me, I have a daily program of strength and stretching and steps. It's called YOGABODY Daily. You can find all that information at yogabody.com. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.